It's time for Korea Book Club, and it's a very special edition indeed today because I'm delighted to say that we have author Jonas Jonasson with us in the studio. He's the writer of the international bestseller, The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of the Window and Disappeared. That was his debut novel and enjoyed huge success around the world, including here in Korea, and he even sparked a movie adaptation. Now his fourth book and the sequel to that first novel has been published here in Korea again. It continues to follow the adventures of Alan Carlson, who is now 101 years old. Mr. Jonasson, it's great to have you on the show today.
Happy to be here, thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say congratulations on your new book and on the Korean version of the book. It's called, we should mention, The Accidental Further Adventures of the 100-Year-Old Man, and you've been here in Korea for the last few days to promote it. Your first novel, it sold over 8 million copies worldwide and it was a bestseller here in Korea as well. How has it been meeting with the Korean audience, the Korean readers so far?
Completely overwhelming. I never met such much love in one go, and eternal long queuings for me to sign a book, which makes me, of course, happy and proud. And they give me gifts like candy, cookies, love letters. Overwhelming is the correct word.
Sure. As you were talking just before we started, you originally started, you weren't always a writer, you weren't always an author, you were a journalist at first, and then you came into writing a book in your 40s, I understand. So could you have imagined this when you first started writing this, your first novel?
No, at the time I had quit my journalist and media production company career, and the only thing I had was money in the bank. I had no identity, so I realized, and especially in, I guess, in the Western world, the first question you actually asked when you meet a new person is, "What do you do for a living?" And then you better do something for a living, or otherwise it become awkward. So I decided to find that old manuscript of mine and to finish it and try to get it published, because then I could say I'm an author. I didn't give a shit about whether it would sell a lot, but it would give me an identity. And then it sold, as you said, millions and millions.
So let's talk about that first book. It was a global hit, so I'm sure many people will know already. But for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about the story, the main protagonist, the 100-year-old man, Alan Carlson, and the kind of hijinks he gets up to?
You mean in the first book?
Yes, in the first book, yes.
Yeah. Mine and Alan Carlson's relationship developed during the writing, I can say. I hired him to be a guide through the 20th century. My literary idea was to reveal the shortcomings of the 20th century with a glimpse in the eye. For that purpose, I needed a guide. And this guide, he needed to be quite old by the end of the century. Otherwise, you cannot be a guide over the 100 years. And while writing, my relationship to him and his relationship to me developed, and suddenly, he was in charge of everything. He was the superstar. He was not a mere guide any longer, and he had at least 2 trips around the world. He met all the important world leaders, and he treated them as he thought they deserved to be treated.
Right, it's almost by accident he meets all these peoples of the world-famous leaders, and that kind of carries on in this new book, I understand, where he gets to meet, I understand, of the people he meets, President Donald Trump and then Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader as well. So the book, there's actually something interesting with the Korean title of the new book. As I mentioned, the English title is The Accidental Further Adventures of the 100-Year-Old Man. But the Korean version has not translated that exactly. The Korean title translated back to English is closer to The 101-Year-Old Man Who Escaped with Nukes. What do you think of that Korean title? Were you informed of it before they published it?
I don't know actually, but what I do know is that I completely trust each publishing house in each country and their decisions, because they know the market, they know their own readers. And to be honest, the English title and the Korean title, I would say, is even better than the Swedish title. and the Swedish title I came up with.
Oh, so what's the Swedish title?
In direct translation into English, it would be the 101-year-old man who thought that he was thinking too much.
Ah, okay.
A little bit too complicated.
Right, so when we mention nukes, of course, as I said, we continue with these adventures of Alan Carlson, and he gets to meet the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. I don't want to give too much away, but also in the first book, as we said, he has other experiences in North Korea, meeting with Kim Jong-un's grandfather and father, Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. Why North Korea? Why these figures that keep appearing in your book?
Well, if we start with the second book, it's all natural, because there, if the first book was the idea of revealing the shortcomings of a century, then the second book was revealing the shortcomings of present time, and the book was written during 2017, from January to December. And the final content couldn't be decided until I knew what would happen in the French election. I knew whether Angela Merkel would still be in charge in Germany. And of course, I knew how this verbal conflict between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump would end.
Right.
It's so intense during 2017. You know.
Right. We should explain during 2017 between North Korea and the US. North Korea was hurling insults at the US and Donald Trump and firing missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and that was when Trump was talking about fire and fury and about how he said he could invade North Korea and that kind of stuff. So that was 2017, right?
Yes, it was, and it was quite bizarre for me as a fiction author, because I had, personal egoistic reasons for that, except the obvious reasons for that to calm down. And a very important thing to me was, for the storyline only, that Angela Merkel stayed on her post. So it was strange times for me. Yeah, I really was mixed up between reality and fiction in my head.
But it seems like the North Korean regime sparks an interest in you, it sparks some sort of creative kind of juices flowing for you. Perhaps because of their absurdist, almost nature sometimes.
It is so mysterious. I lived in Switzerland for some time, and so did Kim Jong-un. And to me, it's so hard to understand how you can be so familiar with and used to the Swiss way of living, and then going back to Pyongyang and to lead what you are leading there. They are really the opposites of each other, and it's scary. It's fascinating, and it's quite hard to create fiction around it, because you it's much easier to make fun of Donald Trump, because you know what you got.
Right. How has it been writing about North Korea and then coming to South Korea to talk about the book and to see how it's received? Were you concerned at all about any kind of reactions, or were you confident that people would get it?
I was deadly scared of people's reactions, and I think I am about to survive it. But there's still 2 days left, so I'm not sure. But I think I get away with it. And I have had reactions from South Korean readers already having read the book and saying that they loved it. And one of them even said, the second book is better than the first one. So I think I nailed it, maybe.
Right. I mean, let's go back to the book as well, because the character, this 101-year-old man now, he's an interesting character because he's not a particularly, I would say, intelligent man. He's not done but he's also done some pretty terrible things as well. But readers still seem to love him. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's kind of strange because he is a political idiot. He is dangerous, you could say, and still we love him. We should be ashamed of ourselves somehow. Now he has a good portion of charm. He doesn't hurt people on purpose. Basically, he treats people the way he thinks they deserve to be treated, and he really doesn't care whether they are presidents or generals or multimillionaires, and that is kind of refreshing. He is refreshing. And he is climbing his own window again and again, and I think that is a temptation for many too.
So that first book was published in 2009 and the sequel came out last year, so almost a 10-year gap in between the two. You've written a couple of other books in between then as well. But then did you always think there was going to be a sequel to that first book? Was it always the plan, or did that something that happen naturally?
I was afraid of that you would ask me about how he could be 101-year-old 10 years after he turned 100. So thank you for not asking that question.
That was going to be the next question.
Okay. No, it was... if the idea was, as I said, about the 20th century to reveal its shortcomings, then the new idea was to reveal the shortcomings of present time. From the beginning, Allan Karlsson wasn't involved in that project. I used another character. I named him Martin. I gave him all interesting attributes, and he didn't deliver. Really didn't deliver. So I had to fire him, and I called for Allan and said, "Come back to me. Everything is forgiven." And it felt right. It felt good to work with him another round.
So will we see more adventures of Allan in the future, perhaps? Do we know yet?
Well, I promised my readers that there wouldn't be a sequel, and I lied. So I might be lying again.
Right. You never know. And especially with everything that's going on in the world, there's a lot of things I feel like that character could perhaps point out, for example, as well. Especially as I want to end with that last point as well, because you were talking about North Korea in 2017, and then things changed, flipped 180 with North Korea and Trump. How did you view that, or how would Allan view that, do you think?
Allan lives in his world. I think I think he's on the African savannah now, walking around and thinking about the future. So he doesn't care. As for me, I mean, you could say there are two scary things. That one might be that Kim Jong-un has a red button that he can press. You never know when or why. And then, if I may be respectless, we have the U.S. president. His head is a red button. He can change his mind as he does all the time. He's completely unpredictable, and we live in unpredictable times.
Well, we've been speaking to author Jonas Jonasson about his book, The Accidental Further Adventures of the 100-Year-Old Man, and it's out now in Korean as well. Thank you for taking time to speak to us today, and maybe in the future we'll get to know about Allan Karlsson's adventures in the savannah as well.
Let's see. Thank you for having me.